Hi, Facebook and YouTube. We are going live to talk all about point of view. It's going to be a cool discussion, and hopefully it's cool because right now I'm really warm. It's warm here today. So anyway, I'm going to get Instagram started, and then we will get going. Hi, Instagram. We are live here on Facebook and YouTube over here, Instagram right here, and we today are going to talk about point of view, specifically how to establish point of view in your novel. So I've structured this as some questions you can ask yourself when you're looking at point of view in your novel. I'll talk about a little bit what that is, but then we'll talk about some questions you can ask yourself when you are setting up the structure of your novel based on point of view, so you can decide which character should have a point of view that you write from, that perspective, and things like that. So let's get started. Okay, so the first question you ask yourself is, are you writing in first or third person? So that's more of like some clarity for you. So if you're writing in third person, point of view becomes really important because you need to establish character voice and make it clear to the reader whose point of view you're speaking from. But if you're writing in first person, it's a little bit easier, it's more instinctual, but you still need to be cognizant of point of view, especially because that person only has one perspective. They're not seeing the perspectives of other people from their point of view. So, and throughout the week, I'm going to be talking more about point of view and some reels and stuff. And so we'll get more into the nitty-gritty details of that. But just so you know, make sure you determine if you're writing in first or third, and then that will kind of allow you to figure out how to write the different perspectives. Okay, so we're talking about how to establish point of view in your novel, and we're going through some questions to ask yourself when you're setting up your novel, or even after you've started writing your novel, and you are trying to get an idea of how your point of view should actually be structured. So if you have any questions about point of view while I'm talking, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will go over them and we'll talk and discuss those through. So another thing, if I look a little red, it is warm here today. We don't have air conditioning. It's like in the 80s, so I'm a little warm. But anyway, okay. So we're going through some questions to ask yourself about point of view. The first one we said was to determine if you're writing in first or third person, so you know whose perspective you're writing from and the information that person will have. So, okay, that's the first question. The second question is, how many points of view, anyway, doesn't matter. How many POVs will you have? POV is a shortcut for point of view. Anyway, okay, so how many POVs will you have in your novel? Now, if you're writing in first person, this will obviously only be the first person POVs that you're talking from. So a lot of times, like for example, in a romance novel, if they're written from first person, sometimes it's just written all from the male's perspective, all from the female's perspective. It's written from both perspectives. It's written from multiple perspectives. But if you're writing in first person, it's only, from that person that you're speaking as if you are that person. If you're writing in third person, where you talk about she and he, use pronouns like that, and then you use their name and things like that to establish the POV character, it's even more critical that you're clear on that, because if you are clear on your POV character, you can write from their perspective, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it just helps it be more clear to the reader. So that's kind of the whole idea. This is part of, it's kind of a subsection of show versus tell, which I love to talk about. And all of this is important and it's critical because it makes things clear for your reader. It helps them not to be confused. And if your reader's confused, they're going to stop reading. We do not want readers to DNF our books. So DNF means do not finish. Anyway, I've had that question before, so wanted to fill that in. All right, so determine how many POVs you will have. There is not a right answer for this. There's simply the right answer for your book, specifically for your story. How many POVs do you want? Now, it can be clearer, and certain genres certainly lend themselves to a certain number of POVs. For example, romance, if it's just between two people, then usually it's either one person, the other, or both. And there's not usually other than that. Now, if you were looking into, say, like the series I'm writing, the Codex series is an action adventure series, and I have multiple POVs. And this is like, I'm talking, I think I counted in my first book and it was over 10 because I lost track. And then I'm sure there's more because I've added more characters in. So I just do a ton of POVs. The reason I did this is, and I've seen this in some of Stephen King's book, he has a huge cast and he has a huge number of people to work with, a lot of people to work with, and he wants to write from each of their perspectives and how whatever the main thing is happening is affecting each individual person. So I prefer to do that. I thought that was a really fun way to write. So that's how I did it for my novel. So obviously different perspectives can mean different things, but you generally in modern fiction want to write from the perspective of a character. There is something to be said for narration specifically, which you are kind of like a third person narrator. Sometimes they call them, what is that called? Omniscient narrator. Anyway, so sometimes you do have the narration element of that, but generally in modern literature, you don't want to use that. It feels separated from the reader and it does not engage them as well. So, okay, so another question to ask is, who are your POV characters and why? So once you've established if you're writing in first or third person, once you've established how many POV characters you want, which you could discover along the way, which is how I write. And that's also because I'm a pantser, so I just kind of comes out as I'm writing. But how many POV characters will you have? And why do you want that many? Is it just because you want to capture each person's perspective, which is a great reason to have different POV characters, in my opinion? Is it because okay, well, we'll get to this in a little bit, but you really just want to be intentional about what characters you choose. You don't want to, because giving a character a POV voice, in a sense, if you give them a voice in your novel, it creates a sense of importance to the reader. So any POV character you have is going to feel somewhat important to the reader. Now, there are exceptions to this, like if there's just one or two scenes with them and it's something that helps really establish how they're feeling, like maybe they're a victim of a crime or something, and that person really, you really tap into their feelings and how that crime affected them on a visceral level. So you really want to consider that. So it is permissible, obviously, to use kind of secondary and even tertiary characters as POV characters. But the key to remember here is the more POV scenes that they have, the more important they will feel to the character. So the more you revisit that person and get their perspective on your novel and on the story and the events happening in your novel, the more that reader is going to identify with them and identify them as an important character. So just keep that in mind. Even like I like to use my antagonist and get their perspectives on things, because I really like the reader and the character to be, I really like the reader to identify with the antagonist so that they kind of, feel for them a little bit. So it just makes it more conflicted for them, which is really fun. By the way, it's one of those author things you're just like, yes, I like to do that to my readers. Anyway, okay, so now we've discussed who the POV characters are. Now, the fourth question, and it's kind of two questions, but they're related, so I put them together, and it's probably the most important, is what sets your POV characters apart from each other? You don't want to write every character in the same voice because not every character is the same. It can be argued that no characters are ever alike. So they might be friends, they may be in the same friend group, they may be from the same region, have similar dialects, they use similar phrases and idioms and things like that. But they are not going to have the exact same background and beliefs about things and things like that. So it is important to know your characters really well. Again, this goes back to character building. It's important to know your characters really well, because then you can create their point of view realistically. You can say things from their perspective that maybe are unique to them, or at least unique to people who are like them. For example, people who grew up in the same town, they are familiar with certain streets, for example. So if you have, I don't know, maybe it's like First Street, but the people in the city call it Main Street. Actually, That's usually a thing. But anyway, so maybe the people in the city call it like Bob's Lane or something because something significant happened to Bob on that road. And so now people are in the town refer to it as that. But if you looked at a map, it just say Main Street. So it's things like that. There may be common things they discuss, but it's important to create each character and have them be different from the others. And even if you can get really good at this, you can start getting even the prose and the way you talk about things, because it's in their perspective, it can feel a little bit different than another character. So this is something I'm still learning, but this is what writing is. You're constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly getting better. So I like to try to really get ahead of my character. So sometimes maybe the females sound a little bit different than the males, or I don't know, sometimes some person with if they're more jovial, I guess is the word, if they tend to be happier or something, maybe they crack more jokes in the prose, which is not from their it is from their perspective, but it's not like them writing it. But I don't know, you guys, it's just something to think about. This is probably too in depth to get for this live right now, but it's just a really interesting way to look at that. So know your characters. And the second question of that might be the most important of all. Anyway, why is their perspective important? What makes their perspective important? Again, like I mentioned earlier, you can make a POV from a tertiary character, secondary character, certainly a primary character, and I lump my antagonists in with my primary characters. But anyway, you can make any number of POVs, however many you want. This is the beauty of writing. It's the beauty of the creative process. However, you, again, want to make sure that each scene that you have with a POV character, the more often you have scenes with them, the more important they will feel to the reader. So tertiary characters might have, or the one-off characters, just, a scene or two. Tertiary characters might have a scene or two, maybe none. I did do that in my first novel, if I recall. I didn't write any from some tertiary characters I had, and that's okay. But yeah, so, and then you have your tertiary characters, maybe give them a few more scenes, secondary characters, a few more scenes than that, and then your main characters, which can include any of your main characters, including antagonists, any of the people that are crucial to the scene. You'll give them the most number of scenes. So, and that's again if you do multiple POV. If you do, and there's no hard and fast rules. So it's not like if you're writing dual POV, if you're writing 1 and 2, they have to be even. They don't. It generally can feel more natural the more even they are, but they don't have to be exact. So you don't have to worry about word count here. You don't have to worry about like how many chapters do I have and are they evenly distributed? I wouldn't worry about that. You need to tell the story in the way it needs to be told. So whatever that looks like for you, get it on the page. And then when you need to edit it, you can edit it. It's totally fine. If it doesn't work, you can fix it. Totally fine. All right. So the whole reason we're talking about POV this week is I am hosting a Point of View, Power of Point of View Masterclass this Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I'm super excited about it because it's part of my Show versus Tell Masterclass series, which I started last month, or actually it's now June. So I started in April. And it's just the next installment of that. We're going to talk all about point of view. So the things we talked about today, this is pulled right from that presentation. And we're going to go into so much more, including a ton of examples. So you know how to make it work for you. You know how to revise your book. And the whole point of point of view, again, is to make it clear to the reader that they know who the character is. They feel from their perspective. And the reader doesn't get confused or bored so that they put your book down. We don't want that. We want them to keep reading. So point of view is one of the crucial ways to get your reader to keep reading, to have to read, to have to continue reading and read well into the night, hopefully. Keep them up. That's one of our goals as writers, right? And get them to keep reading your book until it's done. And then can't, wait impatiently for your next one to come out. So, all right. So if you would like to sign up for that, again, it's this Saturday, the 5th of June at 10 a.m. Pacific and it's 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have a lot of fun. You can register now at the link in my bio. Again, we're going to talk all about this stuff on point of view. We're really going to get crystal clear, give you a ton of examples and answer all of your questions, any questions you might have, so that we can get really clear on point of view and you can edit your novel to actually incorporate all of those lessons. And we're also going to go over show versus tell, do a really thorough overview of that too, because this is super important to the concept of point of view. And it's going to be a great time. Our last masterclass was really fun. So I hope you'll join me. Definitely register now with the link in my bio. On the replay on IGTV, I'll put the link, and there's also a link in the Facebook and YouTube. So thank you all so much for listening. I love talking about show versus tell. Exactly. Like, that's my top one. But with point of view, it's just another aspect of show versus tell and how that really impacts your novel and makes it the best book it can be. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Again, I will see you soon. Bye, Facebook and YouTube.